After years of mysterious trademark filings, false starts, and endless teasing, the new Toyota Supra has finally been revealed at the 2019 North American International Auto Show. Set to arrive in showrooms in summer 2019, Toyota has finally delivered on the promise of a new Supra. But perhaps not in the way that most people thought. You see, Toyota partnered with BMW for the development of this car, with BMW making their Z4 Roadster in conjunction with the Supra. And boy, is the internet ablaze with opinions. Some folks are ecstatic. After nearly 2 decades, the legendary Supra nameplate is set to once again hit the streets, and they can't wait to drive one. Others, on the other hand, are much less excited. Some say the specs are too lackluster to pique their interests. Others have said it's just too expensive. But the overwhelming complaint that is painted across forums, blogs, and the comments section of YouTube is this: the Supra is nothing more than a rebadged BMW Z4. Badge engineering, they call it, when one manufacturer essentially pays another in order to sell a car as their own, with their own nameplate, without having developed the car. Now, when most people think of badge engineering, they think of such classics such as the Geo Prism, a Toyota Corolla in the subtle guise of an economical GM sub-brand, or perhaps the Saab 92X, which was simply a Subaru WRX wagon with some sort of a nose job. These cars, like other badge-engineered cars, were products of sales and marketing teams that felt that simply rebadging another manufacturer's car would be more financially beneficial than developing their own vehicle. This approach had mixed results. In the case of the Geo Prism, GM sold nearly 300,000 of them. But in the case of the Saab, well, they couldn't even move 10,000. Now, this isn't to be confused with co-development, such as Toyota and Subaru's development of the 86 and BRZ, or even on a smaller scale, Toyota and Yamaha's collaborative work on engines such as the 4AG, JZ, or even the 1LR LFA V10. Fast forward to now, and the new Toyota Supra has been accused of being essentially the Geo Prism of modern sports cars. But with little to no real evidence found in the comments and blog posts, we began to wonder, what really is the nature of the partnership between Toyota and BMW, and who was truly responsible for the creation of these two new sports cars? The story begins in 2012. Tetsuya Tada, a seasoned Toyota lead engineer, had just revealed his latest creation, the Toyota 86, and he had invited the motoring journalists of the world to come experience it on Jarama Circuit in Spain. This car had the world's attention because it marked the first time in many years that Toyota had a legitimate sports car in their lineup. The reaction from journalists was positive, to say the least.
Yes! Yes, yes, yes!
Tada-san was no doubt pleased with the feedback he received from journalists, and was excited to have finally finished this project, especially considering the fact that it was a grueling 5 years of development. But as the day was wrapping up, Tada-san was approached by a mysterious man who introduced himself as an employee of BMW. This gentleman congratulated Tada on the launch of his new car, and then enthusiastically said, "Wouldn't it be great if we made a car together?" Then he invited Tada-san to the BMW headquarters in Germany to talk about what a Toyota BMW project could be. After speaking with Akio Toyoda, CEO of Toyota, Tada-san found out that they had been in talks with BMW to collaborate on a number of projects and technologies, a partnership nicknamed the Silk Road. However, the one stipulation that Akio put on BMW was that they also create a new sports car together. Tada-san was flown out to Germany immediately after finishing up in Spain to meet with a team from BMW. There, both Tada-san and a small team from Toyota began to brainstorm what sort of car they could make. Initially, neither BMW nor Toyota really had much of a concrete idea, but then the BMW team asked Tada-san what it was that he wanted to make. Of course, he knew that Akio Toyoda had wanted a big brother to the 86, and that the world had been feverishly asking for a new Supra for the decade that the Supra had been out of production. So that's exactly what he proposed. A front-engine, rear-drive, turbo inline-6 powered sports car, designed to be a weapon on both the street and the track, all while staying far away from supercar prices, which would significantly limit the accessibility of this car. The team at BMW were receptive to that idea and deliberated over what they could do with such a car. BMW already produced a number of front-engine, rear-drive, inline-6 powered cars, including a coupe with the 2 Series, so they had to approach this idea from a different angle. The car that came to mind was one that they had discontinued not too long ago, the Z4. It certainly fit the bill in terms of being a front-engine, rear-drive, i6 powered sports car, but the caveat was, it was a roadster, and roadsters are designed from the ground up with the lack of a roof structure in mind. So Toyota and BMW spent some time discussing the specifics of creating these two cars, and eventually decided that they would have to develop an all-new platform that was designed to be a solid enough foundation to handle both coupe and convertible variants, while still being extremely rigid, and also capable of managing a significant amount of torque without being unwieldy. Klaus Frohlich was to head development on the BMW side, and Tada-san, of course, on the Toyota side. And with the overall vision for the project set, the two teams set to work. Both teams were to work in unison to develop the platform and also decide what the drivetrain and suspension setups would be. The platform was an arduous process, with either team having totally different approaches for creating a car from scratch. This difference in engineering ideology, in addition to the constant language and culture barrier, did make for a slow start to the project, with both teams getting frustrated with one another and constant delays. However, there was one particular engineer who was largely responsible for making the peace between the German and Japanese engineers, Masayuki Kai. Kai was actually born in Germany and spent the first 10 years of his life there before moving back to Japan and later becoming an engineer for Toyota. Not only was he fluent in German, but he was also well versed in German culture and etiquette, which proved to be a difficult obstacle for the Japanese engineers from Toyota. After he took a lead position liaising between the two teams, progress began to happen at a rapid rate. The teams worked together to build out all of the hard points in the chassis, including the basic structure, wheelbase, track width, and suspension design. Being an all-new platform, they had the freedom to do whatever they wanted, so both teams decided on focusing on agility in all aspects of the design. Thus, a more aggressive wheelbase to track width ratio was chosen, one that was considered right in the middle of the golden ratio at 1.55. For the drivetrain, the answer was obvious. BMW already produced inline-6 turbos, so it was a no-brainer to use a BMW-derived engine. But at the time, the current BMW inline-6, the N55, wasn't exactly a motor that was in line with Toyota reliability standards. BMW had an answer to this, however, as it had recently started work on a new inline-6, one that was based off of the modular B engine platform. The timing of the development of this motor was right, and the two teams began to work to create a version of that motor that would not only be stronger and more powerful than BMW's previous inline-6s, but also far more reliable. Tada-san and his team were also initially surprised with the level of commitment and spending that BMW was doing on the initial R&D for the platform. They weren't used to spending at this level for a low-volume project like this. But later on in development, BMW was taken aback with Toyota's focus on reliability and durability testing. Toyota engineers broke down full motors during the development phase and sent thousands of parts back to Japan in order to have full failure analysis and testing done on every component. Any part that didn't meet Toyota's standards was sent back to Germany and revised by the teams in order to hit their quality and reliability standards. Toyota engineers went so far as to test individual bolts and rivets extensively to make sure they were up to the task. The suspension design was largely taken from existing BMW cars, since both teams enjoyed the characteristics of the various M cars that BMW made, with the added benefit that this allowed them to use existing parts in the BMW supply chain, thus keeping costs down for both development and, of course, the end product. The McPherson strut front suspension and multi-link rear suspension utilize fairly similar layouts to current BMWs, and even borrow the forged control arms found in M cars. And one of the cooler BMW parts bin pieces, the M electronic differential, is found in the back of both the Z4 and the Supra. Speaking of supply chain, by the way, it was decided early on to manufacture the car in a facility that already had access to the current BMW supply chain, since the drivetrain components were going to be derived from existing BMW parts. Thus, Magna Steyr was chosen to produce the car at their plant in Graz, Austria. While not being a BMW manufacturing facility, Magna Steyr has a long relationship with BMW, having produced the X3 for 7 years, and also currently manufacturing the 5 Series. However, they don't just make the 5er, they also produce the I-Pace and E-Pace for Jaguar, and have also been the producers of the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagen since 1979. Being a third-party manufacturing company, this allowed both Toyota and BMW to tailor the manufacturing processes to their specific requests, since each respective company has its own individual manufacturing strategy. The last piece of the drivetrain puzzle was the transmission. Now, when it comes to a manual transmission, the Z4 is the lone twin that offers it, but only in the European 4-cylinder spec. No manual transmission is available for the 6-cylinder models of either car, and although it seemed as though there was one in testing, it never made it to production. To this day, there's no real concrete answer as to what the reason was why no manual transmission is offered. In interviews, Tada-san has stated that there is one in early development, but only has a possibility of being released if there's enough demand. And while it seems like the internet is crying out for a manual transmission, the only metric that will truly tell are the sales. On the other side of the coin, the automatic transmission that was chosen for this car was the ZF8HP, an 8-speed torque converter automatic. While a dual clutch was initially considered, it was quickly overruled in favor of the 8HP due to weight, smoothness, and reliability. This particular automatic transmission has certainly proven itself in the automotive world, with having great torque holding capabilities and shift times in under 100 milliseconds in some applications, all while being extremely smooth and reliable. Many have called this transmission a BMW transmission, however, which certainly isn't the case. While the ZF8HP variants are used across the BMW range, this transmission is almost an industry standard, being currently used in Alfa Romeos, Aston Martins, Audis, Bentleys, Chryslers, Dodges, and Jeeps, as well as Jaguars, Lamborghinis, Lancias, Land Rovers, Maseratis, Rolls-Royces, and even Volkswagens. After the completion of the main components of the platform, BMW and Toyota said their goodbyes and split off from one another. From this point forward, the chassis, exterior designs, interior designs, and all tuning of suspension and drivetrain components were to be done totally independently from one another. Both Toyota and BMW wanted their cars to not only look different, but also drive differently from one another, and thus both companies stayed to themselves for the latter part of development. But this wasn't the only reason that the companies parted ways here. Strict antitrust laws in Germany actually prevent the creation of badge-engineered cars. According to these laws, the most a foreign manufacturer like Toyota could do with BMW was to develop the basic platform of a car. But beyond that, both companies had to develop their cars independently. The Supra's exterior design was based off the Calty FT1 concept from 2014, with Nobuo Nakamura leading the design team. On the BMW side of things, Adrian van Hooydonk was responsible for shaping the Z4. There was one thing that was still done in collaboration, however, and that was the on-road durability testing. BMW was responsible for testing both cars in extreme weather conditions, as well as doing durability testing on the public road. Toyota would supply the prototypes to BMW, and the tests would be performed, with the data being given back directly to Toyota. Toyota engineers would do track and performance testing independently of BMW, both at the Nürburgring and at Toyota's home track in Japan. By the tail end of the project, Toyota engineers had never even driven a pre-production Z4, and didn't know what it was like. But in 2018, both Toyota and the world's automotive journalists again found themselves at Jarama Circuit in Spain, test driving another one of Tada-san's creations 6 years later. After the press had taken out the prototype Supras on the track, they were asked if anyone had driven the BMW Z4. Only one hand raised, and it belonged to MotorTrend's Chris Walton. When asked how they compared, he said that they were distinctly different. Walton later goes on to write, "The Supra and Z4 provide entirely different driving dynamics. We've driven prototypes of both, and each has its own personality. Unlike the Toyota 86 and Subaru BRZ platform-sharing coupes, which are nearly indistinguishable from each other in styling or feel, the Supra and Z4 each have its own distinct bodies, interior design, and driving dynamics. So don't be tempted to say they're the same car, one with a roof and one without. The Supra is every bit the slick Toyota you expect it would be, or should be." Of course, this is only the opinion of one journalist, and only time will tell what other people think of the Supra-Z4 relationship after both cars have been driven. So where does that leave us? Is the Supra just a rebadged Z4? Well, according to the facts, probably not. The Supra twins are built on a collaborative platform that has been co-developed by both Toyota and BMW since its inception. And while it's an unlikely partnership, one that perhaps very few people actually asked for, it has brought us two sports cars that would have never existed without it. What does that mean for the cars themselves? Well, it's impossible to truly tell until the world has had a chance to put both cars through their paces. But in a world where ever-tightening emissions regulations and a heavy focus on electrification and automation are constantly threatening the very existence of gas-powered cars, the creation of two all-new sports cars designed for those who love driving is something that should surely be celebrated.